And somebody that they have not released and they're still holding in that Belmarsh prison is Julian Assange. And, you know, we're not getting much. We don't see much in the media about Julian Assange. He's sort of and I would call him a citizen journalist of a type. I mean, I know there have been a lot of monikers that have been thrown around about what Wikileaks did. And if you remember, Julian Assange was kind of like the main guy at Wikileaks. He's certainly not the only guy at Wikileaks because it's an organization. But he was the leader, the figurehead. For many years, he was, free. He moved about the world freely. And that was until he reported essentially on some murders that occurred during war. We call those war crimes. And there were some murders of some alleged journalists who were murdered by an Apache helicopter crew who decided to just kind of shoot up a small crowd. Now, you know, we don't know all the details of the hows and whys that came to be. I mean, we certainly weren't on the ground at the time. So, you know, all I could say is that in warfare, and Pat George, you're familiar with this somewhat just from being a student of some of this stuff, but in warfare, you're always going to have war crimes. They're just going to happen.
Sure.
Just like friendly fire incidents. You cannot avoid them.
Victims, sure.
I mean, nobody ever intends to go to war and create a bunch of collateral damage, have friendly fire incidents, but they happen in every war. It's the fog of battle. You know, there's some confusion. So now we don't know the basis for why these, what we'd call extrajudicial killings were done in wartime. I mean, perhaps they unintentionally killed these guys for one reason or another, or perhaps they just had a moment of, you know, pure psychopathy and lost their minds and killed them just for fun. I mean, that happens as well, and we've seen evidence of that going on in some of the wars we've been involved in. And, you know, word to the wise, maybe this is one of the reasons, you know, that we shouldn't be too quick to get involved in wars unless we absolutely have to. I mean, it's easy to sit back and just say, well, I mean, let's think about it. I mean, we should know the truth, right? We want to know the truth of what's actually going on the ground. So what the problem is that our government doesn't ever want to tell us the truth. So it wants to suppress stories like war crimes, like friendly fire incidents. Pat Tillman, was one who was apparently killed by friendly fire incidents. And, you know, who knows where all that went, because there's even some ideas that, you know, maybe that was intentional in one way or another. But leaving all of those kind of distinctions aside, the point is that the government doesn't really want us, the people, to know about some of the, you know, less attractive parts of war, you know, which is, hey, we're killing each other. Hey, we're killing random civilians who didn't really do anything. They just kind of caught in the crossfire. Hey, here's an instance of us just killing some people for fun, maybe some of whom were even journalists. So the government doesn't want us to know about that. So if you go out and you publicize the fact that that happened like Julian Assange did, now you become, you know, public enemy number one, which is exactly what happened to him. And we saw these rape charges that were brought against him in Sweden, which frankly have fizzled away. They seem to be kind of about as serious as the rape charges that were brought against Brett Kavanaugh last year. So you don't think that they can't gin these things up on people. You know what I mean? When they want to take you down, don't think that they can't find some willing person to have a memory of something that happened either a few years ago or, heck, 30, 40, 50 years ago. They'll find somebody who will get up and swear and maybe even be somewhat convincing that that's actually what happened. And, of course, we don't know what actually happened. So maybe he did rape somebody in Sweden. We just don't know. But the point is that, you know, he very quickly realized what was going on there was they were trying to get him arrested in Sweden, and then they intended to extradite him to the U.S., where he's under a sealed indictment. So naturally, that's when he went into the Ecuadorian embassy, and he was there for, I think, 6 or 7 years. He was inside of there. And then finally the British police, as we remember, and this was through agreement with the government of Ecuador, went in and pulled him out of there and kind of carried him out, if you remember the video, carried him out. And since then, we have not heard much from him. And I'll tell you, I watched 60 Minutes last night, and, you know, Anderson Cooper did a lengthy special on this artist. And, you know, he's obviously a very well-regarded artist, somebody who Anderson Cooper has one of his works in his home. And I just thought, wow, you know, what a story. I mean, for an investigative journalism group like 60 Minutes, what a story. And yet nobody's talking anything about Julian Assange, who remains in prison to this day. He's not been charged with anything right now. He's just being held because they think that if they let him go, he'll escape. and they know the U.S. wants to extradite him. I'm being serious. This is exactly why.
There are no link on rules when they have to have a trial or something.
I mean, wouldn't you think so? I mean, that's what I don't understand. I don't understand. How can you just hold somebody without trial? Well, you know what? We're looking at things from the perspective of the American Constitution and our Bill of Rights and the way that our legal system works. And that's not the way the system in the UK works, and that's not the way the system works around most of the rest of the world. I mean, can you imagine being in jail in Saudi Arabia and saying, well, my rights, what about my rights? And they said, what rights? You're in an absolute monarchy. The king can do whatever he wants,
well,
and
what
you
are you
have
charging
no
me
rights.
For?
Yeah, well, we're charging you just because we don't like the way you look, Pat George. We're keeping you in here. We don't want the people of Saudi Arabia to have to gaze upon you. But, so I'm trying to remind folks to think about the importance of our press freedoms. Think about the importance of our rights under the Bill of Rights, of our rights to know why you're being held, not to be held without charges indefinitely and things like that. And, the fact that we're involved at some level, that we want to extradite Julian Assange here to the U.S. and are possibly saying to the British, hey, just keep holding him until we get our extradition request ready to go or whatever it is. I don't know what the delay is. But the fact that we're involved, I think, is a little bit shameful. I mean, I think we ought to just accept what Julian Assange has done. I mean, he's revealed the truth to people. Obviously, our government didn't want it known, but now it's known. I think overall, the populace is healthier for knowing the truth than they are for believing a lie. So I think overall the population, it's better if we know the truth. It's better if we know the truth about war, because maybe then we won't be so supportive of rushing off and getting involved in all these wars all around the world. And, and I think we saw quite a bit of that if you think back to the mid-2000s with what happened with the Iraq War and the Code Pink protesters and everything else. And I have to say, I'm amazed at how that has merged and morphed into the modern-day Democrat Party and the modern-day progressive left, as they might call themselves, because they are as pro-war as the neoconservatives were just 15 years ago. And so it's amazing just to see the change in the way that people look at war and talk about war as a tool of diplomacy and as a tool to get what we want in the world.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.